Welcome back to Torah on the Go. Whether you are on your Peloton or taking a walk with your dog or taking a break from work, we are glad that you have taken a few minutes from your day to learn with me and my podcast buddy, Rabbi Feinstein.
Good to have you here.
We are nearing the conclusion of the book of Exodus. We have only a handful of episodes left, and we are now at chapter 25 out of 40 chapters. So the first 24 chapters talk about everything that we know from the Passover Seder, everything we know from the Ten Commandments movie, the Prince of Egypt, everything, all the good stuff is in the first 24 chapters. Chapter 25 to chapter 40 is about the biggest Lego construction project we've ever done, right? The building of the Mishkan, the Tabernacle. And this is really the last third, and it occurs with, it's written with such attention to detail. Mm-hmm. Every nail, every pole that gets attached through every tent piece, the skins and the everything that's involved in building the Mishkan. Why do you think it occupies such a large section of real estate in the Torah?
Well, first of all, because it's a radical idea. In the ancient world, you met your God in a special place. There was a god of the mountain. There was a different god of the river. There was a different god of the valley. There was a different god in each locale. This idea that you can take God with you, that God belongs to a people that wanders the world and that God accompanies them on their wandering. The idea that you could create a portable shrine that isn't attached to any particular place. I mean, Mount Sinai is the mountain that God comes down on. But as soon as God is finished, Mount Sinai goes back to being a schleppy mountain in the middle of the Sinai. It has no intrinsic holiness. The holiness inheres in the divinity, and the divinity is portable. And that already is a radical idea. That is a crazy idea for the ancient world. And then the question is, how do you do it right? So there are certain human arts in which you are allowed a certain degree of improvisation. Jazz music, for example. A certain amount of originality, a certain amount of riffing off of the rules. But there are certain human arts that have to be done just right. And when it comes to worship of God in the Bible, it's one of those arts that has to be done just properly, just right. There's no room for improvisation. There's no call for originality. There's certainly no room for initiative or anything new. Here's how it's done. And so the emphasis is put on all of these minute details of the creation of this thing in order to emphasize to you that this has to be done properly. That when you're dealing with God, it has to be done up front and right.
So the Parsha begins with Moses' call to the people to please contribute. That's what Terumah means.
And we have been doing that ever since.
Ever since.
Rabbis everywhere.
One giant building fund appeal after another, right, has consumed the rabbinate. But Moses asks the children of Israel for a contribution, and the children of Israel give too much, too much. And so Moses says, stop giving. And the children of Israel stop giving.
Right.
Stop giving. So here we are, we're at this place where the children of Israel have contributed, and we're not just building a Mishkan, we're building the Mishkan as the model for the first Jewish institution. We later learn that the Mishkan sits in the very center of all the tribes, at the heart of our kind of communal traveling. As we walk through the desert, the Mishkan sits at the heart of who we are. God says in Parsha Terumah, Asuli mikdash v'shachanti betocham. Make for me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among you. Now, literally, it could mean that God dwells in the middle of all of the tribes amongst us, but the rabbis don't see it that way. The rabbis see it as build for God this holy place so that God will actually live inside of us. Mm-hmm. God will dwell inside of us, not in the holy place, meaning we remodel the sanctuary, but we don't actually believe that God lives in the sanctuary. God lives amongst us. When we gather as a community in the sanctuary, God is present because the whole community has come together in the sanctuary.
That's a radical theology. That's a radical different theology than in ancient times, certainly, but even in modern times. There's that idea that God inheres in a community and in the shared energies of a community. That is a radical idea.
And so how do we square that circle with other religions? Other religions around the world really believe that God pays special attention to special people, right? So there are clergy in other ritual practices, in other religious practices, that can absolve people of their sins.
We can't do that?
We can't do that, no.
Oh, no.
I hate to tell you, I don't know how many people you've absolved today.
Oh, my
but
God.
We can't do that. We can't assign.
Do they charge for that service, or is it free?
I'm sure that they do charge. If they were Jewish, they would charge for sure. So we, from the outset, craft this very strange, and by strange I mean compared to the rest of the world in terms of how they understand. You call it a radical theology. From the outset, we're taking steps to differentiate ourselves from those around us. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we do that?
Well, look, we just got out of Egypt. Look at Egypt. I mean, all those buildings were built on the theory that this place is holy. The Pharaoh who is buried in this pyramid, it exudes a certain holiness to this place. You build monuments that are eternal because you believe that these characters are somehow alive in another world. All of that is pushed away by the Jewish tradition, and instead you get this idea that we're going to build an institution, but it's not permanent. It's not a pyramid or a sphinx made out of a gazillion pounds of, tons of limestone. It's a tent that can be folded up and moved. This is a crazy idea, right? And that the God of the universe comes to spend special attention to this people in its wanderings, wherever we end up. And wherever we end up, God lives in that place. These ideas are just so crazy radical. Even today, they're crazy radical ideas. And then, of course, there's a moral to this. There's a deeply moral challenge. So how do you have to live in order to deserve the divine presence in your midst? What kind of community do you have to create? What are the rules and regulations and contours of this community that is going to be a divine community, a divine residence in the world? Raises all kinds of wonderful ideas.
Right. And we've been trying to grapple with those ideas from the beginning.
Forever.
From the beginning.
Right.
And so, Maimonides, and we were just talking about Maimonides a little while ago, Maimonides views the tabernacle and this whole system of sacrifice as a stepping stone, mm-hmm. meaning we saw all these sacrifices going on in Egypt. They would sacrifice to the sun god and the moon god and the water, the god of the waters and the god of this and the god of that. And we build this monotheistic system, but also use sacrifice. Mm-hmm. But we do it in this kind of radical way, let's say, with the tent system where we see the sacrifice being offered. Mm-hmm. There's no magic trick. When we see that the meat after the sacrifice has been offered is taken off of the altar and it's fed to the priests and the Levites.
And to us. It's a sacred barbecue.
Right. We were the original NASCAR barbecue fans. That's right. So we're the tailgating people. So I just feel like there's, within the tent system, and maybe that's why there's kind of this focus, this attention to detail. Within the tent system, there is the hidden and there is the revealed.
Right.
And the Mishkan is about both.
It's about both. The thing I like about this is a little bit later in the Torah, when we get into Leviticus, we're going to talk about the priestly caste and what their jobs were. And it gives us a list of all of the priests' families and what they schlepped. Remember, this is a moving people. They are moving across the Sinai Desert toward the Promised Land. So at certain points along the journey, the tabernacle is set up, the Mishkan is set up, sacrifices are offered, prayers are offered, God lives with us. And then what happens is they dismantle it. The thing is dismantled into its parts. And each priestly group, each Levite group rather, gets to schlep a part of it. So I just imagine, who's the guy that has to schlep this big, heavy roll of dusty carpet across the Sinai Desert? And it's schleppy, and it's hot, and it's dusty, and it's difficult, and it's chafing, And then, he does this work, and then what happens is they stop, and the Mishkan is reassembled. And this guy can stand back and gather his kids and say, see that third section of carpet over the, not one, not two, number three, that's me. That's ours. We contribute, we supported, we sustained this holy place in the world. And the idea that every one of us can look and say, I'm part of this thing. I'm part of this community that is responsible for bringing God into the world. I am part of this institution, this instrument, which directs divine energies right into our world. And that's why we work so hard. That's what we do it for. It's such a remarkable metaphor for the efforts to create and sustain a holy community.
If you read and study the texts that describe our holiest institutions, whether they be the tabernacle or whether it be the temple, I think what happens is that you begin to appreciate humanity more. I mean, it's all about God and it's all about service to God, but there is the notion that if you study it enough, just like you explained, you begin to appreciate the schlepper of the carpet.
Right.
You begin to appreciate, there's a story in the Talmud that how would not the Kohen Gadol, not the high priest, but the ordinary priest, how would they begin the day? They would wake up and they would basically play rock, paper, scissors to see who got which jobs. All right, it's like an ancient form of rock, paper, scissors. And then they say, well, why did they play rock, paper, scissors? Well, because before that, they would get up in the morning and they would race.
Oh, yeah.
They would race to the altar to see who would get the job, the number one job. And one time, two priests were racing, and one pushed the other off the ramp of the altar, and he fell, and he broke his arm, and they called Mark Gettleman. Okay, and the Talmud records that whole story. So, and that's how Mark Gettleman began his career.
Amen.
So, but you realize that even the holiest class of our people, even the most righteous, even the highest, let's say, the ones who are entitled to do the holiest work, there's such humanity in the people that they were.
Right.
They were incredibly human, and the Judaism and the Jewish tradition in our text has never tried to hide that from us.
They're incredibly human, and yet, let's go to the other side of it.
Sure.
The other side of it is when they engage in the process, they put on the robes and the diadems, the crowns. When the Mishkan is set up, there's a magic to it. Yeah, I remember when I was a kid, with the school play. You sit in the audience and watch your best friend in the school play, and suddenly they're not just your best friend. There's something magical that happens on a stage. Right. Something magical happens in the drama, the ritual drama of a play, the ritual drama of ritual. And that person who you're so close to all of a sudden becomes, glows a little bit. And so this thing that we create, I had to schlep the carpet, yes, but now that it's put together, now that it's erected, now that it's functioning, it does have a divine aura.
Right.
It becomes a holy place. In our place, any afternoon, come to the shul and you'll see little kids screaming and running up and down the hallways. They actually believe they own the place, which is our greatest triumph. And yet, when a holiday comes, the parents say, no, this is now reverent. Now there's a reverence to this place. That ordinary human being becomes the high priest.
That's right.
That ordinary stretch of carpet becomes a section of the holy vessel that brings God into the world. Our efforts, our sweat and our tears and our sustaining gifts, suddenly that becomes terribly holy because it creates this place for God in the world.
As a matter of fact, the high priest wore a headband that said Kodesh Ladonai on it. And the commentators of the Torah wonder, was the message for him or was the message for all of the people who came to visit that place?
Right, it's not just Joe anymore.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's
exactly right. I love when, I love the experience of going to a school play as a parent now, especially when the school chooses a play that's totally inappropriate for the age of the children who are playing the roles, right? So whether it be Mamma Mia or Chicago or, Death of a Salesman or something.
Fiddler on the Roof.
Right. There's no way the kids can comprehend
Right.
the themes that they're talking about. And in this way, people aren't meant to live and comprehend the themes of high holidays every day of the year. Mm-hmm. We can't live like that. Mm-hmm. We can't live like that. So we come to shul or we come to the tabernacle or we come to the temple on a regular basis. And then several days a year, it becomes something else.
Right, and what's wonderful, this because you're doing this now so many years. There's the contrast between the two. People find very charming, alluring. I don't know what the word is. The fact is that at one moment they're sitting in shul looking up at us as we're performing these rites and rituals, leading a service, doing a funeral, doing a wedding. And they recognize that there's something else in us. And then to come to Menchie's and get an ice cream, and there's your rabbi and his wife or
That's right.
her husband, and sitting there and enjoying Menchie's, say, oh my God, it's the rabbi, like you're actually human. You're actually, a real human being with real emotions and real activities in your life.
You tell that story, the great story about the kids seeing you in the supermarket.
No, that's true. Look, Mom, it's God.
Look,
right.
Mom, it's God.
Right. I was walking through this market. This is my first week as a rabbi. I was 26 years old, brand new at this. And I was walking down the aisle with 2 gallons of milk. And the kid was coming up the aisle with his mom in the shopping cart. He was one of the kids in my school. And he said, look, Mom, it's God, And he's right. Now he's on the board of directors. Thanks.
Right.
No, but because when we play the role, there is a certain aura.
Right. We aspire to Kodesh Ladunai.
There's a magic to it.
Absolutely.
But the thing that makes it beautiful is that they know that we're still human.
Right.
And they can come to us and be a friend, and they can come to us and share an ice cream, and they can come to us and see us in the supermarket. And they know that just like them, we are human beings aspiring to be Kodesh Ladonai. It's something we all have to know how to do.
We hope that this episode has in some way helped you aspire to become Kodesh Ladonai as well. We hope that you take the rest of your day and pursue a little bit more godliness, a little bit more divinity, one step closer to Kodesh Ladonai.
Amen.